So I wanted to show the Miracles match where I got to beat my opponent through a moat, but it looks like Moto ate that one. So instead we have this one. Let's see. So this hand's obviously heapable. My opponent leads on a top, and I lead on Noble Hierarch on the basis of I want to do things with my mana like Ponder or whatnot next turn. So opponents do nothing. Hand proceeds. And I opt to ponder before brainstorming here. And I keep these because Forceful is pretty good here, and the extra Noble is also a pump spell that I want. So I could draw the Noble, draw the Force for my next turn, and then shuffle away with the Verdant, and then get rid of the extra fetches with the Brainstorm. That was the logic on the keep there. It's not like the best three cards, but it's better than random, I think. It's actually pretty good. My opponent has the swords for my creature, but that's fine. As I have the backup creature and the force. Still more miracles doing nothing work. So I think my logic here was that I didn't want to overextend Terminus by playing this other noble, and I could play the other noble. Basically, so 2 plus 2 plus 3 plus 3, so Noble Nexus, Noble Nexus, Noble Noble Nexus, Noble Noble Nexus. It still kills in 4, regardless of whether I play this now or later. And I can make my decision as to what to do. I can make my decision as to what to do after he spends a couple turns looking for a Terminus if he fails to find. And he has a V-click. So I'm going to force here, and I don't know if that's actually correct. My logic was that if he resolves V-click, it's definitely correct. So because this is click, if it was swords, I wouldn't force because I'm pretty sure the brainstorm would get me to another guy. But because it's click, I'm put into a situation where he's going to take my brainstorm, and I'm not going to have enough ways to find another creature in my hand. I'm just going to have to naturally draw it and lose the Nexus. So force here, I think, was pretty clear. If he has the counter back, he would have countered my brainstorm or my next guy anyway, so it's basically the same as him countering the force. I guess it's possible I should have led on the brainstorm instead of the ponder. It's hard to say. So, same situation as last turn. I don't have to overextend. Plus, if he's going to kill anything, it's going to be the Nexus. So, next turn is when the chance I have to play this other noble, like the last chance to make the right clock. But he has another sword, so we have to go for the life total beatdowns. So, as you can see, Misty is going to fetch up this Dryad Arbor. And I do the math, and it's the same kind of thing where I don't have to extend the other noble into a Terminus just yet. So this Arbor gets in there, gets in some damage. And I think this next turn is where I may have made a small mistake. No, it's the turn after this. So Swords takes that guy out. Actually, it may have been this turn too. So 15, I should deal 3. No, it's not this turn, because dealing 3 this turn is fine, because it puts him at 12. But then we'll see what I mess up on the next turn, after we do some math. So he hangs out with the Snapcaster, whatever. And it's clear that he doesn't have a Terminus on top, or we would have fired it off by now. But I moved to combat here, and that was a pretty big mistake. I should have played this Noble, because I get to deal 4 this turn, and then I get to deal 4 next turn, and the 4 from Invigorate, so that's lethal in 2. But he also has a Swords for a Noble, which makes that attack completely not work at all. So I missed 3 damage there. At this point, I'm pretty sure I'm dead, by the way, because the Brainstorm is going to put him into a position where he can set up an in-hand Terminus in many ways, or an in-hand anything. So I shove in for some damage. And here we go. This is the point where I decide Something important to do. So in response to the fetch, I'm brainstorming. That way he can't actually flip the top because he'd lose it. But he has a 1-drop. It doesn't resolve. Attack comes in. He takes his damage. He chomps, sorry. Previous turn's damage. If he didn't block, I don't think I would fire off the Invigorate still, though. I'd try to wait to set it up with another spell next turn to force him to, like, move top around. But, as we can see here, he flips Terminus. I determined that at this point the game is basically unwinnable because of the counter top lock. I think there's ways to fight through it, but I honestly did not feel like doing so, or that that was the best use of my time at this point, honestly. Especially with him at such low Infect. If he was at higher Infect, there's definitely an argument for like continuing to play and getting to a point where you can get a Nexus into play and possibly chip shot him out, but I don't think that's really possible from this board state. So I considered this game ended. Okay, so my game 2 keep is a little on the loose side, but I figure with this many cantrips, I'm just going to get there anyways, and I do have a lot of disruption to fight him. By get there, I just mean to find a dude, so I feel like with this many brainstorms, this hand has to be powerful. So I lead on my Catacombs and decide I want to fight over tops this game, because I think that his deck without a top in play is significantly worse and kind of a crappy blue-white control deck. So I dropped the Noble because I think that opens up more options, and it's also something that progresses the game without me potentially brainstorm locking myself. So as soon as the game hits the point where the game no longer progresses favorably for me, that's when I think I want to start potentially brainstorming locking myself. So last turn, as you can see, I tried to fight over a second top, but he had the Spell Pierce back, which is kind of a huge beating. And now that he has a top in play, I do have to end the game pretty fast so he can't utilize it. So Brainstorm hits, and hits some pretty good ones. I opt to put back 2 Vines of Asswood here so that I can leave up the Force of Will, which will counter a Terminus or something similar. And also because I don't get to kill him in 1 turn. So let's just go through the math. I mean, it's really simple, right? I play Glistener Elf this turn in the Nexus, and then I do 5 and then 5, or 6 and then 6 with the attacks or whatever. Or I can spread it out with Exalted Trigger, Glistener Elf 2, Exalted Trigger, Glistener Elf 2, Vines 6, and leave up the other Vines. But I'm not going to be able to kill him with both Vines next turn, so I can put them both back on top and just leave up the Force of Will and cast all my cards this turn. So I guess there's not entirely a reason to extend the Nexus necessarily. There is. If the Glistener Elf gets swords, I just think about like situations where I want the Vines in hand this turn. There just isn't. So I opt to move in on Vines here. I'm trying to think of what my logic on that was. If he has the swords, I can force it. Oh, that's what it was. It was that I wanted to move in on this turn as opposed to later in case he finds a way to wrath my board. I think it was specifically Supreme Verdict because then I'd lose my green-green. But instead, he just does nothing. I pass back to him. He's going to tap out and play a Jace and bounce my Elf. I think that his right play was actually to bounce the Noble, but we'll get to that in a second. And I decide I just want to kill the Jace so I don't have to deal with any of this bouncing nonsense. So I get to put his Jace down to dead, thanks to the Exalted Trigger. Whereas if he had bounced the Hierarch, I would have Elf in play and this, and I have to attack with both. Though I guess just bouncing the Hierarch means that I can just single Pump Spell kill him. But the Pump Spells in this deck are all things like... So maybe if... This might be like a thing where people are more familiar with the Modern list. But this list, from this board state, the Pump Spells that kill him from 6 Infect without a Noble in play are all free anyways because of Invigorate. So I don't actually, like if he bounces the Hierarch, he's just the same amount of dead either way. I guess I could just kill him this way anyway, so I think he should have bounced the Hierarch and forced me to use all of my mana this turn to kill the Jace and not be able to recast Glistener. I also wanted to control the Jace that turn so that he can't brainstorm a Terminus back on top or something like that. So he's going to draw his card, Brainstorm, which sets up probably a Miracle next turn. Except for he fetches. And concedes the game because he has nothing. Notice the lovely Moto bug of revealing cards that are being looked at if the game ends while you are looking at them. That's been something for multiple years now. Okay, so this is a draw I definitely debate. Yeah, I don't know if this is right to keep. I decide to in the end because I think the probe and the being on the draw is a pretty big plus. But at the same time, like being on the draw also makes it a lot worse because I have to burn the force if he plays a top on one that I want to fight over. And this hand is definitely one that wants to fight over top because it lets me utilize my counter spells early. So as you can kind of see, that's how this plays out. I force pitching the Daze under the logic that's the worst counter spell that I could have. Probe away. I saw Ponder, Spell Pierce, Entreat the Angels. So I decide that, given his draw step, also a counterbalance and the planes. So he can't cast the counterbalance, and the only action he really has in his hand is this Ponder. So I'm just like, oh, I just want to fight over his spells that are getting him somewhere. So I Spell Pierce this on the spot, which is, I'm pretty sure, a good play, because the rest of the hand does approximately nothing. This was a pretty good time to Brainstorm because I had at least one dead card there. And I decided to let myself draw an extra dead card by playing the Nexus. I felt like getting the extra Infect damage was relevant because I've put him in a situation where he's effectively mana screwed, or just like doing things screwed. I feel like I need to capitalize on that quickly and get in the kill and 2 attacks by going 1 and then 9. And I can sacrifice 1 draw step to redraw a fetch. So he plays Counterbalance. I animate Nexus, shove. You're going to see what happens here. Look at his reveal cards real fast. So I decide that sooner rather than later is the time to pull the trigger on this Invigorate before he has mana up for other things. And if he has a sword, like, also the other thing to consider is that if I fire off an Invigorate this turn and he flips a 3, that means I can fire, like, wait on the next one, fire it off the next turn. And it gives me the most, like, again, I'm trying to kill him as fast as possible, and this gives me time to find the open spot. So I Invigorate, he reveals his swords, which immediately means that he doesn't have something to stop this, but I also just have to fire this off anyways, because if he draws the swords, he's just going to stop it whenever it happens. So both Invigorates get fired off, he goes to 9 Infect, and we begin a little bit of the waiting game. So I fetched on upkeep to get rid of that, and I draw a Force. He has a Spell Pierce that we know about, though, so the Spell Pierce is going to counter this Force basically regardless if I don't have a blue card. I'm going to cast I wanted to play the land because I knew I wanted to play a land anyways, to cast Force for mana. But I run out the Blighted Agent. It's possible I should have waited to try and set up a turn where, like, bait spell for the counterbalance, he flips something and I know it's clear. But there's not a lot of 2s in this deck, so I figured sooner rather than later was probably better with him at 9 Infect. But he flips a Reb, and he's just going to kill my Blighted Agent, so whatever. I draw a blank. He draws another white source, which we'll see in a minute is important. More doing nothing. More doing nothing. I draw another Nexus, and I decide that I should probably move in this turn, I think. Because even if he has swords... So, like, my thought was force him to use the swords here, and then potentially draw a land and have Force back, which doesn't matter too much because of Snare. Or because of Pierce. So I don't know if it's, like, 100% right to attack here. But I don't know how much it actually matters when I attack with the Nexus. Because of swords. Oh, actually, it does matter. I actually think I'm just realizing this now that I punted the game here by attacking this turn instead of waiting. So I attack, it gets swords, and he draws his 3rd white source this turn. So he gets to cast Entreat for an Angel and counter my Force of Will. And if I had waited, I'd have 2 attackers for his 1 blocker. So I did punt this game right here. I didn't even realize it. So Glistener Elf gets countered by a card that I actually knew was there, which was really dumb on my part. He revealed this when I cast Force last turn. Though to be fair, he probably shouldn't have revealed and just cast the Spell Pierce. But again, more turns of doing nothing. Second Berserk does nothing. More sitting around, more sitting around. And he end of turn Vendilion clicks me, which means that he actually gets to start attacking. He opts to leave me with my cards, which is kind of a nightmare, and ponders. And I decided that with this Vines, it's basically now or never, because another turn gives him another chance to like draw a top, draw a Brainstorm. Just like not super impressed. Looking at it again, let's look if he... I don't think I actually checked this at the time. Card top. Chose not to shuffle. Yeah, it's possible I should have waited if he chose not to shuffle then. Because that probably means he kept a relevant cost on top, and he knows my whole hand is 1, so that was probably a mistake, actually. So I made 2 big mistakes this game. So I go for it. His top card is a 1. I'm just dead. It's really not even close. And he also has a removal spell. So at this point, if this guy's going to die, I'm going to take 7 next turn. He knows one of my cards. And I'm basically dead before I ever get to attack with another Infect guy.